Some games are loud because of stars, and some are loud because of stakes. Then there are some games that are loud because a guy usually works in the background, decides for one night, he's the whole offense. On August 26, 1981, at Shea Stadium, the Astros needed somebody to stop the slide. Art Howe answered with 5 RBI, 2 doubles, and one of those box scores that makes you sit up a little straighter when you see it. Greetings and salutations. I'm Kevin, a civilized sports goblin with a bright idea. The top 100 players from each of the 124 Big Four franchises. Right now I'm working on the Houston Astros and the Golden State Warriors, but I'll get to the other 122. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. Today's episode is Astro 29, and the featured player is Art Howe. From August 26, 1981, when the Astros beat the Mets 9-3 at Shea Stadium. Houston walked into this one annoyed. The Astros just lost 4 straight road games and had dropped the season opener of this Mets series the night before. Even before their 1980 breakthrough, this was still a club that could feel a little bit fragile when their bats went cold. But the strike had chopped the season in half, and the second half was a fresh race. So this wasn't a dead team. It's a 500 team, a tense team, and a team that still believes the division was there if they could get out of its own way. The Mets were in a different emotional zip code. They're still a rebuilding operation under Joe Torre. By season's end, they finished 41-62, 5th in the National League East. And there were interesting players there. Mookie Wilson, Hubie Brooks, Dave Kingman, John Stearns, but not yet a coherent winner. The mood is less push for October and more try to survive this thing with some dignity and maybe find some pieces for later. Baseball itself, meanwhile, was still kind of weird. The 1981 strike had forced a split season. So everybody was playing regular season games inside a format that already felt a little bit crooked. On the same date as this game, Gary Templeton's public blow-up in St. Louis became national baseball news. And within 5 days of this Astros-Mets game, Houston made a meaningful in-season move by trading for Phil Garner. So the sport around this game felt unstable, improvised, very 1981. And the cleanest subplot is this. The Astros and Mets were fellow 1962 National League expansion teams. By August of 1981, they're living very different lives. Houston's trying to prove 1980 wasn't just a fluke. New York is trying to become New York again. They have the same birth certificate, but different adulthood, and that gives this game a nice undertone. It's one expansion franchise trying to consolidate competence, and the other still wandering towards its next identity. Houston manager Bill Verdon is an old-school baseball man in the purest sense, a former 1955 National League Rookie of the Year, and a Gold Glove center fielder. Later, he's a respected clubhouse presence who already guided Houston to its first postseason appearance in 1980 and won Manager of the Year for it. His Astros had a reputation for hustle, pitching, and demanding your full attention. Across from him was Joe Torre, which is funny in hindsight because we now know him as a Hall of Fame manager. But in 1981, he was still in the rougher, less glamorous phase of his managing life. He was a Brooklyn baseball man, a brilliant former player, and this Mets job was grinding him down. The 1981 season would be his last with the Mets. For Houston, the starter's Don Sutton, already one of the great professionals in baseball, even if the Hall of Fame plaque would come much later. Sutton had come over from the Dodgers after the 1980 season, and he's exactly what Houston wanted. Innings, intelligence, and craft. The sense that a game had structure as long as he was there on the mound. For New York, it was Pat Zachary, the Texan who won the 1976 National League Rookie of the Year with Cincinnati, and later became a key part of the Tom Seaver trade. By 1981, he was still useful and still competitive, but he's no longer the kind of pitcher that a contender fears. He's the Mets representative of a past attempt to rebuild, and not the finished product of a successful one. That came later. The obvious Hall of Fame presence in this specific game is Don Sutton. Joe Torre's a Hall of Famer too, although he's a manager rather than a player. There's no MVP winners in these starting lineups, but there's several men with great and real baseball gravity. Dave Kingman, With his moonshot reputation, John Stearns as a hard-edged catcher, Cesar Cedeno as one of the great what-if talents of the era, and Art Howe himself coming off a strong 1980 and an even better 1981 at the plate. Art Howe was born in Pittsburgh and went to Shaler Area High School, where he's part of a state-titled baseball environment and developed as a multi-sport athlete. He then goes on to the University of Wyoming on a football scholarship. That's one of the key turns in this story. He arrives as a football player, got hurt, and baseball became the surviving road. That detour matters because Howe was not some polished teen phenom rolling down a conveyor belt. He graduated from Wyoming with a business degree, returned to Pittsburgh, and worked as a computer programmer at Westinghouse. Only then, he got discovered playing weekend ball and attending a Pirates tryout camp. By 1981, he's already the kind of player people underrate because he arrived late, looked ordinary, and just kept producing. This game probably felt like vindication disguised as routine. Howe had already done big things for Houston, especially in the 1980 tiebreaker against LA, and in May of 1981, he was good enough to win Player of the Month. But a night like this still matters because it let him be unmistakable. No subtle fielding value, no solid veteran language. Just look at the line. Art Howe won this game. So the stage is this. Shea Stadium, split-season baseball. Houston's trying to stay alive and attached to the second-half race. New York is trying to hold a lead once it gets one, and Art Howe is positioned right in that in-between baseball space where players respected but not yet mythologized. Then the game starts, and Houston wastes no time. In the top of the first, the Astros come out organized and mean. Tony Scott singles, Craig Reynolds walks, Denny Walling walks. Suddenly, the bases are loaded with nobody out. Jose Cruz brings in the first run with a sac fly. Then Art Howe adds a second sac fly. Alan Ashby singles home Walling, 3-0 Houston. The Mets are already in the kind of game they didn't want to play. And here the Houston Astros go quiet for a minute. But in the third, they do it again. Walling singles, steals second, and after a couple of Zachary strikeouts, Art Howe doubles to center to score him. The Mets answer in the bottom half. Doug Flynn singles, Ron Hodges walks, Mookie Wilson singles one home, and Frank Tavares adds sacrifice fly. Suddenly it's 4-2, which is a different emotional score than 3-0. In the fourth, New York turns it to 4-3 on John Stearns' sacrifice fly. That's the point in the game where this could have become another irritating Astros loss. Another one where they scored early, and then the drift happens. Instead, Houston answered like a serious team. In the sixth, Ashby gets aboard, moves up, and Tony Scott doubles to bring him in. Back to a 2-run game. Then comes the seventh, which is why we're here. Walling singles, Cruz singles, Cedeno singles. Bases loaded. Art Howe doubles to right and empties the diamond. Walling scores, Cruz scores, Cedeno scores. Houston goes from ahead, but nervous, to fully in command. A little later in the inning, Vern Rules singles home Howe because baseball enjoys piling on when it begins to sense a theme. Final score was Astros 10, Mets 3. Howe finishes 2 for 4 with 2 doubles and 5 RBI. The angle the next day was simple and fair. Howe would come in with only 19 RBI and 242 at-bats. Then drove in 5 and stopped Houston's 4-game road skid almost by himself. That's enough. Sometimes the best post-game quote is the box score wearing a trench coat. From this point forward, Houston looks more like the team it wanted to be. The Astros were 36-36 after this game, but they finished up 61-49. They would finish 61-49, win the second half of the NL West at 33-20, and make the strange, strike-born postseason. Then they took the first 2 games of the division series against the Dodgers before losing the next 3. That's very Astros, honestly. Close enough to touch October, not quite strong enough to hold on to it. The Mets, meanwhile, didn't have that kind of turn in them. Not yet. They finished 41-62, still buried deep in the East, and years away from the swagger machine that they became in the mid-'80s. This game didn't derail a contender, but it reminded everyone which of these expansion siblings was further along. For Houston, the game meant oxygen. It turned a 4-game road slide into a reset and kept the second half campaign from becoming slippery. For New York, it was another lesson in the difference between hanging around and controlling a game. For Art Howe, it was one more entry in the case that he's not a spare part in a good team. He's one of the reasons that the team is good in the first place. Howe stayed with Houston through 1982, later finishing his playing career in St. Louis, and then built a long second life in baseball as a coach and manager. He would go on to manage the Astros, Athletics, and Mets, finishing with 1,129 managerial wins. So this isn't just a nice game from a nice player. It's a chapter from a baseball lifer who kept finding new ways to matter. Next time we switch sports and head back into the early history of the Warriors for Warrior 05, Ernie Beck. Another trip to the part of franchise history where everything feels half-invented and completely foundational. Thanks for watching Astro 29. I'm Kevin, and I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. If you got thoughts on Art Howe, the 1981 Astros, or the beautifully strange split-season year, drop them below. Stay kind and keep moving, and I'll see you next time.